No, no, no. I'm glad you did. I'd rather. Yeah, there's several people in the waiting room now. Let's see who all's in there. I'm gonna let Robert Purdom, Angela. Is yours under your name? Oh, well, let's see. And you have your name on there, right? Because I'm not finding your name.
Hello.
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 Hey.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me go get it. Okay, are you ready?
Hello, Alice.
Hello. Okay, the meeting ID number is 874-654-736. And then, you ready for the password? The 530066. Oh, perfect. Okay, I'll go ahead and put you in right now. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, let's go simple. I'm letting the cancel percent first.
You haven't had me on camera, so I guess I'll stay on camera.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me turn.
All right.
Mr. Mayor.
Smile, Robert.
Morning.
There we go. I see Robert. Can y'all see me? I see
Yes.
you.
I see you.
Y'all can hear me? Perfect. I can't see anybody but the mayor and right now. Oh, and I can see Josh. You too, Josh.
That's Alice.
That's a little bit of a fuzzy beard for Alice.
Mayor's got jokes.
There's Scott. Oh, there's Jerry. Angela.
Jerry's here.
I don't see Mr. DuPriest.
I'm here. Uh-oh, what happened? Click down at the bottom, Rick, and see if you can enable your video.
I don't see anything. There's nothing at the bottom of the deal.
Are you on your computer or are you on your phone?
On my phone.
Okay.
I got the agenda on my computer.
There should be a little dot to the side of your phone that's like your settings.
Oh, it's not the bottom. Yeah, that dot. Okay. Start video.
Start video.
Yep.
There you are.
All right.
Oh, Mr. Rick.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. How about yourself, sir?
Needing a haircut bad. Look like Sasquatch.
You hadn't gone to Corona cuts yet lately?
I'm sorry?
You hadn't gone to Corona cuts? They're the only ones open.
Yeah.
Well, we got Jerry on.
Jerry's here.
All right. Well, I've got 6:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's our regular city council meeting. It's not going to be at 101 South Main tonight. We're doing a virtual video. Meeting is subject to the open meeting laws of the state of Texas. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:30. We do have a quorum present. I'm going to ask Robert Purdom to lead us in our pledge, and if everybody would remain standing, Scott Kimball will do our invocation.
Please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, one God, one and indivisible.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this day you've given us. Lord, we know these are troubling times in our country. Father, we know that there are things going on that we don't know, that we don't see, but you do. Father, I thank you that you're giving the wisdom to our leaders and to those in control to handle this circumstance the way it needs to be handled. Father, I thank you that you're staying with, protecting, and keeping all of our first responders, our doctors, our nurses, all medical staff. Lord, just a special blessing be upon them. Lord, supernaturally energize them to continue to fight the fight that they are fighting. Lord, I thank you for this counsel. I thank you for the wisdom that you've given us. And Lord, I ask that wisdom continue tonight during this meeting, that you bless this time, that we can do the work of the people of the city of Joshua, and we can accomplish it the way it needs to be done. We thank you and praise you for all these things in the name of your Son, Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, the first item on the work session is to review and discuss questions related to the budget and the financial statement. I guess it's going to be a little bit hard because I can't see everybody on here at one time, so I'm just going to go down the list. If anybody's got any questions, if you'll bring them up at that time. Rick, do you have any questions on the financials?
Not right now.
Okay. Mike?
No, sir.
Angela?
No, I do not.
Okay. Robert?
No, sir.
Jerry?
No, sir.
Scott?
The only question I have, I had sent my email to Josh earlier today. The only question that remains unanswered, are we sure that our police officers are being taken care of time-wise, time-off-wise? I know this has got to be a strain on them with all the special things that are out there that they have to be concerned about.
Yeah, so as it stands right now, there's nothing that the virus or anything virus related that has caused us to change any of our protocols. There is in the PD packet or in the PD report, I believe there is some of the protocols they have implemented to kind of adjust to account for, some of the safety issues that all of us, but especially those who are first responders, are kind of on the front lines of this and don't really have the luxury of not, engaging with people on a kind of a face-to-face basis. Some of the things that they've done to mitigate some of that risk. But as it stands now, there's nothing that changes our protocols in terms of anything that has changed budget issues or supply issues or anything like that.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
All right, assuming nobody else has any other questions, we're going to move on to number 2, is discussion regarding the update to the city strategic plan, quality of life. Josh?
Yeah, so this is our last pillar, pillar of our strategic plan. Just to review real quick for those in attendance and maybe watching, we have economic development, public safety and infrastructure, governance, and quality of life. And in quality of life, we've kind of saved the last, because quality of life, if you really think about it, really encompasses those other 3 pillars as well. So when we talk about quality of life, when it comes to the strategic plan, it's really anything that wasn't covered in the first 3 pillars. So you have the existing plan in front of you in terms of the template that we have that we've been working on for the last several years. If there's anything, any new ideas, any additions to what's already on there, anything that you guys think that we need to address or update. As you can see, several of these things when it comes to quality of life are basically ongoing. So do we just need to keep going with these things? Do you guys want to see them updated in a specific way? You want to see them integrated or related to the other pillars in a different or specific way? This is just kind of an opportunity to do this. Now, obviously, with everything that's going on, and the delay in the election and everything else we'll be doing, the delay in the zoning ordinance adoption, the rewrite of that we'll be looking at probably in the next month or two, everything's kind of slowed down. So we do have a couple months here to kind of reevaluate, and there's no really rush to finalize this update to the strategic plan as it were. But any new ideas or anything you guys want to see on here, we're all staff is open to that, obviously, and we'll implement that as you guys see fit.
All right. I think I can see most everybody now. So does anybody have any questions for Josh on this?
No.
All right. Then we'll go to number 3. This discuss and receive an update on the cost analysis of the financial impact of a homestead exemption. I had Josh run some numbers. They're in the packet. Initially, I'd hoped we could maybe do something even around the 15%, but I think with everything that's going on right now and with the virus and where we're going to be taking the hits on the sales tax, I don't think that one's feasible at the present time. But I would like to see us do something. We've got a lot of our residents are seniors, but maybe they haven't hit the 65-year-old mark where they're going to be have their taxes frozen, but their own fixed incomes, or some of them are working part-time jobs, and those part-time jobs now have disappeared. And I just think with the population of Joshua and the way it is, I think it's very important that we do what we can to try and help them out a little bit. So, I'd like to see us at least maybe do a 5% homestead exemption, but I'd like to hear from everybody else and see what y'all have to say. Scott, you got anything?
Well, with the current situation and everything, I could see, doing something, but nowhere near the 15%. The 5% level, I think would probably be a maximum that we would want to go. Now, once we set this, we can always change it, correct?
You can go backward, you can go forward, but you can't go back.
Okay, so once it's set, we could always increase it, but we can't ever decrease it. That's good to know. I'm just, again, not knowing what the total impact of this coronavirus junk's going to do to us. I don't know if we just need to put it off and wait for a little bit, or if we need to, do it at an absolute minimum and then think about raising it from there as things change.
All right, Jerry, you got anything?
Yeah, Joe, I think, jumping out there with 5% right now, I don't have a fear of right now. I think the city can handle it. I think especially when we get into the budget aspect and look at it at 5%, but I really like to see the city move forward and put in place maybe a 5-year plan where we go 5 now, 5 in another year or two, and finish up getting to the 15 where we all agree that would be a good solid run.
I like that. I agree with that. Robert?
Did we ever find out that if your taxes are already frozen and your valuation has gone up over time, if the seniors out there, if we did do one of these exemptions, is it really going to affect their bottom line tax dollar?
If they're over 65, depending on when they went to over 65, if it was last year, there's a possibility we would go back, the taxing authority would actually recalculate it. But probably if it's been a couple of years since they've been 65, then it's not going to do a lot for them. Their taxes would stay at whatever they were when they turned 65, because that's going to be the lesser amount if you compared the two. But like I said, if somebody turned 65 last year and we did 5%, it would just depend on if their house value was the exact same as it was a year ago. Yes, this would help them just a little bit.
Okay, with this coronavirus and everything, it looks like our decrease in sales tax is going to be nearly, or our estimated decrease is going to be nearly what some of these exemptions would be. I kind of agree it'd be a good idea to do something, but I do think it should be a phased in deal with the option to change it in the future. I hate to say we're going to do it a 5-year plan, 5 now, 5 next year, and 5 the next, rather than 5 next year or 5 this year with a goal of being to the 15% in 5 years, rather than fix the hard deadline on it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Angela, you have any comment?
I agree with Jerry. Actually, I think it will be a good idea to do it in a 5-year plan.
Okay. Mike?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Josh.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Well, I agree with Jerry that starting off with 5's not too much to ask. I was thinking starting off with 10, but that's just my thoughts. But a reevaluation in a year, next budget round, looking at it again and deciding whether to go ahead and go up to the max, to the 15, or to just jump 5 or whatever. I think would be a good choice for us to make. I think 5% to start with would be good.
Rick?
Well, I was thinking 10%, but listening to Jerry, I kind of agree with him, 5%, and then the next year 10 and next year 15. But then I think we need to look at the budget and see how it's affecting us. But I do think we need to revisit next year if we put 5% in now and see how we could handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And
But I
Joe,
agree with Jerry.
Joe, I think it's one of those things to just make sure, that, yeah, we go 5% now, but I just don't want the council to lose foresight that, hey, if it's 1 year or 2 years before we go another 5%, we just got to make sure that it's always on the forefront that, hey, that's the goal. We want to get there. We just got to be smart with it and get there. The community's going to grow. The city's going to grow. It's already happening. Yes, we're going to have some sales tax hit this year, but with the growth, I think that's going to kick back pretty quickly for us.
I agree.
Yep, I think so. Josh, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Obviously don't want to be the Debbie Downer in this conversation and the greedy city manager, if you will. But I just want you all to keep in mind that, the current budget, last year we lowered the tax rate by a penny, and we still dipped into reserves by a significant amount. Okay, so we are currently having issues with filling public safety positions, specifically in the police department. We just as an example, we recently lost one of our longtime sergeants. Put a notice out there for applications and not received any applicants that are worth even looking at. And the chief has expressed concerns that the pay is the primary reason for that. We also have an issue with the public works department to where we've recently actually increased the starting pay for public works employees. And we still lack 3 positions. We're still down to 2. And if you remember, we've upped our materials supplies budget. We've also purchased recently purchased some equipment to allow us to do some things. We just don't have the manpower to actually use the equipment to do the work. So just keep that in mind as we talk about this homestead exemption. Another thing to keep in mind is that the state in the last legislature changed a bunch of rules for us when it comes to property tax. So while we are experiencing growth, it remains to be seen whether that growth is going to continue to result in increases in revenue, operations revenue that we're actually available to use, or whether or not we're going to be hit by the de minimis rates are, that, a lot of that's still up in the air. A lot of the truth in taxation worksheets that we have to use for this budget year have not been finalized yet. So this summer is going to be very kind of all up in the air. A lot of our budget preparation and adoption schedule is going to be condensed by a significant margin, at least, or as many as 30 days. It may not hit us because we're in that small taxing unit, de minimis population. But just keep that in mind as we're talking about limiting our revenue, by at least, if we talk about 5%, another $100,000 when we're already into the reserves by, a couple of 100,000. So just keep that in mind as you guys are thinking about this.
Josh, I think we do. We have a pretty good grasp of knowing and understanding the gravity of the situation, but I think also we have to move forward, and this is the right time because budget is coming up in the next few months. And so I would think the council has a pretty good agreement that, hey, if we throw into this budget a 5%, estimate now, I think that's the direction we need to run with. And as we get into the budget process and we see where cuts need to be made or things need to be trimmed and so forth that's where we all kind of sit down and get together and, kind of help with your help, decide what's going to, make it or not.
And didn't the budget this year, a lot of that taking out of reserves came from the SAFER grant anticipation that we ended up not getting?
Yeah, dollar for dollar, you could make the argument that the use of reserves was to cover our match in the SAFER grant. Now, some of that was in other departments. When you look across the board for the global budget, but a large chunk of that was our match for the SAFER grant. That's correct.
Like I said, I think. Go ahead.
When would be the last date that we could effectively say we're going to give a 5% and have it go to next year's tax rate?
Well, that brings up, I'm glad you brought that up. We actually would have to adopt a homestead exemption before we actually have before I would actually submit the proposed budget, and we would propose a tax rate. So we would actually have to go into budget discussions already having adopted the homestead exemption.
Well, I think I'm hearing from everybody. I don't, somebody can speak up later, but it sounds like I think we have a pretty good consensus to do the 5% now. And what I would ask is this be put on the agenda for next January or February to discuss implementing another, whatever percentage we think we can handle. We'll have gone through 1 year. We'll have some new council people that'll be on board and see where we're at and hopefully get it to where we are getting close to that 15%. I think that's something I know the citizens have been wanting, and I think as a council, that's something that we need to strive for as well. I definitely understand your issues, but I think the way these appraisals have been going, they're definitely getting out of hand. The city is getting additional money from the appraisals, and I think we need to work towards making a more equitable system. Right now, the CAD is not able to do that. They're having to base everything on values as of January 1st of each year, and probably January 1st, 2020. I don't know that everybody's properties are going to be the same value that they are today. And I think everybody's going to be impacted for this. So I would like to, unless somebody says differently, to say that, okay, let's go ahead and work up the 5% as you're working on your budget. Take that into account that we are going to be doing a 5% homestead exemption. And I guess, Terry, if you could work up whatever paperwork needs to be done.
I can prepare an ordinance.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say on this? All right, we'll go to number 4, discussion on possible topics for a future election to make amendments to the city charter. Josh, did you have some suggestions? I know you and I talked about this, or I can bring them up.
No, the only thing that I remember coming up from last time was the option to move our city municipal elections to November. Alice did some research on this, and frankly, we didn't actually run this by Terry, but I think it was pretty self-explanatory in the state regulations. I believe it was December 31st, 2016, that cities have the option of moving their election date to know the general election or the November date, and you had to have done it by then. It's my understanding we actually don't have the option to move it to November at this point, but Terry may have a.
No, that's correct.
Okay. So other than that, Mayor, that's all I remember from our discussion from last time.
Okay. The only other thing that I wanted to throw out there, and again, this is just something we can discuss for right now. We don't necessarily have to move forward, but I think with the way elections have gone over the last couple of years, it's cost our city quite a bit of money in the fact that if we have 3 people running, you have to have a majority. And I think in just about every case, whoever had the most votes in the first election is who ended up winning the additional election, but it was at a cost to the city. And I would just like to hear some comments if anybody would be willing to maybe go to a plurality instead of a majority. In other words, that way, if we had 3 people running, whoever got the most votes would win. Anybody have any comments?
Let me add, there are going to be some legal issues associated with trying to do that.
Okay, well, if there are, then let's take it off
Yeah,
the table.
I'll take a look at that further, but I don't think we're able to do that.
Okay.
For example, school districts can do that. They have specific statutory authority. I'll be happy to look at that. One other thing that came up that we looked at last time around charter review was amending the charter so that right now, since we have 3-year terms under the Constitution, if we have a vacancy, we have to call an election and fill the seat within 120 days. There's a provision in the Constitution that occurred, an amendment to the Constitution that occurred after our last charter amendment election. And it says that if there's a year or less on the term, or the remaining term of the person who resigned, the council can go ahead and appoint someone to fill that year or less. And the beauty of that is cities were getting in trouble because someone would resign 9 months before an election, and then you have to call an election, and then you have the person serve 2 or 3 months before you have another election. And so the Constitution was changed to say, if there's a year or less remaining on the term of the person, the council can just appoint someone. And again, that's worked out pretty well because the vacancy is going to be filled no more than a year, and then there's going to be an election. So that would save us the cost of a special election, if that came, a special election and perhaps a runoff.
Okay. I like that. And like I said, so maybe Terry, if you could look into that, and then if there were any issues on the plurality, like I said, if there are, well then, we'll take that off the table. And does anybody else have anything else they've maybe thought of that we might want to look at adding?
Not me.
All right.
I think that we were all talking it was specifically in regards to possibly moving the general election. And with that not being possible, I think we're good.
Yeah. Like I said, I enact the plurality, but I think it would be one the council has the option to make changes to the charter. And so if the deal that Terry was bringing up about, filling a position rather than having to call an election and cost the city $5,000 to $10,000, that might be worth something doing, and just let the council take action on that.
So was I hearing him right? We can't change our city charter to have the elections in November?
Correct.
Right.
Now, the governor has given us special authority to do that this year. So that's why we've changed it for this year. But we talked about if we could do it maybe for all the elections, just because of the timing, it would work out better. Instead of a new person coming in right at the middle of budget, they would come in and be able to have a few months under their belt. Honestly, I think we would get a lot better voter turnout if we had ours on the November election. But
I think so too.
If our hands are tied, our hands are tied. And if you see your state representative, you might ask him about changing that. All right, anything else on that? If not, does anybody have any questions on the regular session agenda items? All right. Next item is public forum. This is an opportunity where anybody, unfortunately tonight they can't speak, but we did have it on our Facebook and on the website page that if anybody had any questions or something they wanted to speak at under the public forum section, they could submit that. Alice, did we have anybody turn anything in?
No, sir, we did not.
All right, thank you. And also what will happen is as we're going through these agenda items, Alice is going to let me know if somebody's during this session has come up with a question or something, and then she'll read the question and then we can answer that. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. So that right now, the only thing on the consent agenda is the minutes from our council meeting held on March 19th.
Make a motion, we approve.
I'll second.
All right, got a motion by Jerry Moore, seconded by Scott Kimball to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, raise your hand. I think I got 7-0. Terry, I was trying to count you there, but I'm not going to count you. Next is the regular agenda item. First one is discuss, consider, and take action regarding the acceptance of the fiscal year 2018-2019 audit report. Josh, did you want to say anything, or did we want to go ahead and turn it over to Chris?
Yeah, so we have Rebecca Long and Chris, I never pronounce his last name, sorry. The auditors from Central Larson Allen with us to present they've submitted a PowerPoint presentation like they did last year to present the 2018-2019 audit. Reba or Chris, whichever one of you wants to go ahead and take it, go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Can't hear you.
Yes.
Sounds good. And you should see the PowerPoint on the screen, hopefully.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to try presenting this. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so as Josh had mentioned, this year, along with Reba, we prepared a PowerPoint again to go through the audit results for the September 30th, 2019 audit. And as we go, if you have a question, I'll try to catch it if I can. If not, feel free to ask questions or just interrupt me as we go, as we kind of work through this virtual council meeting tonight. So as we go through it, just a brief introduction of who the audit team is. I will turn it over to Reba to go through the audit results and some required communications. And then between Reba and I, we'll also go through some financial results, and then I'll wrap it up at the end with just a few key summary or kind of wrap up items at the end. So as far as the audit team goes for the 2019 audit, it was myself and Reba leading the engagement team, as well as Austin this year again. And then we also had Danielle as well as an associate for the city's audit. So this was our second year working with the city, and we were excited to have another year with the city this year again. So I will turn it over to Reba to go through the audit results then.
Give me a battery.
Okay, I have lost everything. So
I can still hear you and see you,
Yeah, we
Scott.
can still see and hear you.
I can't see, or I can hear everybody, but I can't see anything. So how do there we go. Never mind, I got it. I think.
I can't get up.
It's technology stuff.
There you go.
Oh, Reba, are you on mute maybe if you're trying to talk?
I'll hear me now.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'll just quickly go through the audit results. The most important thing that we want to make sure you guys know is that this year you received an unmodified opinion. So that's the highest level of audit assurance that you can get. The same opinion that you guys got last year. The one thing that did change this year is our internal control letter. We just had one significant deficiency, and that's because we prepared the financial statements instead of someone at the city doing that. That's a really standard deficiency that almost all of our city clients have, and that's just something that you guys have to weigh the cost benefit of having a CPA or someone on staff that could prepare the financials versus us doing it. So if anyone were to see that in your financial statements, it's a really common thing. I did want to point out that last year you had, we had one material weakness and 2 significant deficiencies in internal control. And this year it's just down to that 1 significant deficiency that you'll probably always have, just being the size of city that you are. So I just want to commend Josh and Joanna for quickly addressing all of the issues that we brought to light in the audit last year. And we also discussed some things that weren't as significant, just best practices. And they were really quick to address all of those things and asked us a lot of questions along the way. So I think that the city's in a really good place as far as internal controls goes. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is our governance letter. So this is required that we just communicate certain things to City Council, just so you guys are aware. If there were anything that was outside of the ordinary that would be communicated in this letter, you would have heard from us way before this council meeting. So everything that we're about to communicate is just completely standard, nothing to be concerned with. So there were no changes in the scope of the audit. There were no new accounting policies this year or new accounting standards that we had to implement. Inherent in financial statements are estimates, and the estimates in the city's financial statements are just the useful life of property, plant, and equipment, the uncollectible balance of accounts receivable, and then the valuation of your pension liability. And we evaluated all of those estimates and we are comfortable with them. We didn't encounter any difficulties while we were performing our audit. We didn't have any disagreements with Josh or Joanna or anyone at the city, and we don't have any other findings to report to you guys. There were no material audit adjustments. There were no past audit adjustments, and then we did issue that separate internal control letter. So overall, really good things to report.
What does past adjustments reference?
So that would be an adjustment that technically we would need to make the financial statements technically right. However, it's so small that it wouldn't affect anyone's opinion on the financial statements, so we could just pass on making it.
Okay, thank you.
And so there were none of those this year. So if we'll go to the next slide, I think Chris is going to go through some of the financial highlights.
Yes, thank you very much, Reba. And I'll go through the first couple of slides here, and then I'll turn it back over to Reba to go through some of the budget to actual information and the comparisons year to year. This first slide is looking at the government-wide financial statements. So this is the overall position for the city over the last 4 years. And as you can see here in 2019, from 2018, you can see that very top line, the expenses for the city. There was just a slight decrease this last year. It decreased a couple of $100,000. And really what that comes down to a lot of times when there is just that slight decrease, it is the timing of various repairs or maintenance type projects there. So nothing real drastic happened in the city that caused that slight reduction there. Then as we move down, the cash and cash equivalents this year, there was just a slight decrease in there, but that really is just a timing of when some of those collections happened. And when you look at the very bottom line, the expendable net position, so that's your actual net position that isn't tied up in, if you want to say, long-term liabilities or capital assets or anything like that. And there was just a slight increase in that this year. And really that's going to be a driver behind that of your actual net position for the city increased slightly this last year as well. So overall, as we would like to say, your overall expendable net position is positive. Your cash for the most part and your investments are holding steady as well when you look at the city as a whole. When we look at the general fund revenues, and on this slide we're looking at what's the proportionality of the revenues for the general fund for the city. And you can see it starts at the very bottom with your property taxes and then kind of works up through sales tax, your beverage taxes, your fire district taxes, and so on. And really what we're looking for here as we start to look over time is what is the overall impact to the city, or are we having to shift the proportionality of the revenues for the general fund, your main operating fund for the city. And you can see from 2018 to 2019, property taxes remain consistent. Your sales tax actually increased just slightly. And then from there, you start to look at your other main categories, your charges for services, your grants, your contributions, franchise fees, all of those other ones remain pretty consistent year over year. So what we're seeing on there is we're not seeing a philosophical shift in how the funding of the general fund is going. So it's consistency, and that's what we like to see. When we look at the expenditure side of the general fund, this is also very similar. We like to look and see how are your expenditures trending over time when we look at, even though the pie is getting bigger, are the slices of the pie staying consistent or not? As you can see, for the most part, this year between the various categories, whether it's the general government, which is a lot of the administrative functions for the city, public safety, your public works, the municipal court, as you can see in there, a lot of those, they stayed fairly consistent. There's a 1 or a 2% trend either way in some of these. And once again, that goes back to, were there any maintenance or one-time costs in any one of those years? But overall, very consistent year over year, and that's what we like to see. We're not seeing a consistent trend one way or the other. And then I will turn it back over to Reba to pick this up from looking at the total revenues and expenditures, the general fund.
Okay, so this is comparing general fund revenues and expenditures over the past 4 years. So you can see that we are trending upwards, but your revenues and expenditures are kind of trending upwards in the same pattern almost. So they're tracking right together. And so that's something that we really like to see. And in 2019, the year that we just audited, revenues outpaced expenditures by about $122,000 before transfers. So it's a really good position for the city to be in. We're going to go to the next slide. This slide is comparing the general fund budget versus actual for revenue. And so you can see the bars are almost totally even there. Oh, go back a slide. There we go. Okay, the bars are almost totally equal there. Josh was right on with the budget. And let me see, the only thing that was a little bit over budget was fines and forfeitures and charges for service. And the main driver of charges for service was just, if y'all remember last year, we changed the way the garbage service was being accounted for. And so you had to budget for that for really the first time ever and got really close to that number. So if we'll go to the next slide, this is the general fund expenditures budget versus actual. And same thing, really, really close as far as the budget versus actual goes. And the only thing that was over was, again, those garbage expenditures. So now that you have a full year of revenues and expenditures related to that under your belts, I think it will be easier going forward to budget for. But overall, you can see that even in 2019, it's probably the closest it's been. So if we'll go to the next slide. This is showing us the unassigned fund balance in the general fund. So this is really what you have available to spend. And that the bar is the percentage of your annual budgeted expenditures that's represented, that's held in the unassigned fund balance. So there's kind of a lot going on with this graph. I did want to point out that, so the bars are increased by about $100,000 from last year. So it does look like a big jump on the screen, but the scale is pretty small. So, and that was just like I mentioned before, that your revenues outpaced your expenditures this year by about $100,000. So we see that little bit of an uptick there. And the percentage line that you see, we just really want to see that around 25 to 30%. And that's really getting you from your September year end to January or February, when those first cash comes in for the new property tax year. And you guys are right where we'd want to see you at 32.1%. And you've been right around that 30% line for the past 4 years. So that's being managed really well. And then the last slide is your future debt service. So if you guys weren't to take on any more debt at this point, this is what your payments would look like. So you'd be right around that 900,000 mark for about the next 8 years, and then slowly taper down till you would be done making debt payments in 2037. So that's just something to be cognizant of going forward. And then I think Chris is going to wrap us up on the next summary slide.
Yep, and thank you very much, Reba. And on this one, really just a couple of things out there is, you know, one thing is you do have the one fund out there with just a small negative fund balance. So just make sure that there's a plan that'll get funded in the future, whether it becomes a transfer or some other mechanism out there to get that back to 0 or above. And as we listen through the first part of the work session in the council meeting tonight, just continue to make sure you're monitoring those sales tax projections in light of all of the effects that all local governments are really going through with COVID-19 right now, and just make sure you're monitoring that going forward. And also just that last piece as well, just make sure you're monitoring the expenditure side as well. For the COVID-19, there are a lot of increased expenditures that a lot of local governments are having to face, whether it was the sudden shift to a remote work environment. If that was the case, did the IT infrastructure for the city support that? Was there enough even laptops on site or remote connections available? There's some local governments that I worked with here recently when the sudden shift to go to a remote work environment or a work from home type mentality, that they didn't have enough laptops or machines for their employees to get online. So one, they were having to continue to pay those employees, but then they were getting paid essentially as vacation or non-productive time until their IT department could get enough machines in-house, but then also set them up. And, you know, with the sudden rash of that going on, they also had to then pay a premium for those machines as well. So just make sure you're monitoring that. We will work with Josh and Joanna for next year's audit as well. As in governmental accounting, there is a kind of a unique thing out there called an extraordinary item, and the COVID-19 pandemic is going to qualify for that under accounting standards. And we'll be able to call out and highlight those additional expenditures that the city is going to be incurring or has incurred, and specifically call that out in the financial statements for next year, so the readers will know what was the increased cost to the city in response to this, whether it's additional sick leave in compliance with one of the federal laws, or the stimulus packages that were out there, increased costs for cleaning, maintenance, those types of things. And we'll work, as I mentioned, with Josh and Joanna to work through that and help determine those costs for next year, so you can see those in the financial statements as well. So other than that, that's what Reba and I had to present tonight. We're more than happy to answer any questions about the audit process, the presentation, or anything else that you may have.
Well, thank you, Chris. We really appreciate you and Reba, all the work that you've gone into it. Josh, I'd like to compliment you. That's one of the best audits we've received. And if you'd also pass along those comments to Joanne, I know she had a lot of work that went into this as well. So I think this is a very good report, and we appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions?
Joe, I think the audit looks good, but it's one of those things that what amazing 60 days can do. We just saw the history in the audit and where we stand today and what we're looking for in the next 90 to 120 days. It's a world of difference.
Right. Anybody else have anything?
Did the debt service numbers that they showed on the graph here include the latest bond package that we passed?
No, sir. They're not gonna, we actually haven't issued those yet.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, these are going to be, these financial statements are as September 30th of 2019, so they wouldn't have included those, but they will be on the next one once we issue those.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have anything? Not Josh, do we need to vote on this to accept it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I'll entertain a motion to accept the 2018-2019 audit.
Moved.
All right, say it again. I didn't catch who did that.
I'll make a motion, Mike Kidd.
All right.
And I'll second it.
All right. I got a motion by Mike Kidd, seconded by Angela Nichols, to approve the 2018-2019 audit. Anybody else have any other questions? If not, all those in favor of the audit, raise your hand, please. Looks like the motion carries 7-0. Again, thank you, Chris and Reba. I appreciate y'all signing in with us virtually tonight. And I think the city, Josh had good things to say about y'all, so appreciate it. And I guess we'll have one more year with you guys. So appreciate it.
Yes.
Next item.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for being
Thank you.
Next item is
Thank you.
to discuss, consider, and take action regarding the 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2021-2025. Josh, I assume you're going to do this one?
Yes, sir. We have updated the CIP, obviously, for kind of the rolling 5-year plan. A lot of what you see, if you look at the second page, which is the detailed list, you have the summary list after the cover page, which is kind of the catch-all for each department, if you will. And then you have the detailed page that lists the different projects for each department. I've identified, in this plan, I've identified the street projects that were approved, or that at least were included in the bond that passed this last November. We moved those to 2021. Now, that some of those will likely to be kicked off later this fiscal year, whether they're actually complete in the 2020 fiscal year or the 2021 fiscal year remains to be seen. We're doing some work now on scheduling and cost estimates and getting those things updated. These costs have been updated, okay, since they were in the plan from last year with a cost increase of around 3%. The remaining streets we put out to 2025 just so they're on the schedule as higher priorities than some of our other streets, just to show them on the plan. And then obviously anything that we had on the plan last year in terms of equipment or vehicles that are still a priority, we moved those up a year, updated those costs. There's not going to be a lot of change in those costs for those, except for the out years, starting about 2024 and 2025, when we expect some of the some increases in our passenger vehicles, specifically for patrol vehicles, of around 10%. If you remember, we do a initially when we established the CIP, we had a citizens committee that helped us identify, after an internal assessment, identify priorities. This year, we took that same assessment and just updated it. Next year, I plan on reconvening a committee to reestablish that, which I think is always a good idea every 2 to 3 years, getting kind of public input on that. But these are kind of remaining projects, remaining equipment or vehicles that were on the plan last year that we still think are our priorities. And gets us to the one addition, I would say, that, if you will, that was not on the plan as of last year, was a replacement for animal control in terms of their vehicle. We did add that to this plan. Of course, it's not until 2024, but this is your 5-year plan. But other than that, most of what you see on here are going to be what you saw last year, just moved up the year and updated for the cost.
Josh, I had a question about the downtown revitalization project. There's consistently been a to be determined beside that. Are we looking at starting any of that this year, or do we have a determined date to start doing some of the work downtown?
Sure. One of the reasons that we have kind of an ongoing TBD, like you mentioned, Mike, is we really don't know what's going to happen with the underpass yet. It was our understanding that we were going to be having the next public meeting or public open house for the additional alternative route that they were going to come up with because of the historical asset that they identified and they previously identified alternative or preferred route. That's a lot of words there, but the preferred route we thought we were getting, which is just south of 14th Street here, they identified an historical asset, so they had to go back to the historical preservation, the State Historical Preservation Committee. They had to go back to the national level environmental agency to kind of reestablish whether an alternate route would either get them around that historical asset, and if it did, would it actually encompass more historical assets? So once that historical asset had been identified, they actually put that back into the plan and basically resubmit that to the public in an additional town meeting, which was supposed to have happened this spring. Obviously, with the coronavirus issue and not being able to congregate, they have postponed that public meeting indefinitely. So until we really know whether they're going to go south of 14th Street here or right down 12th Street, which is right in the middle of downtown, we really are kind of in a no man's land in terms of planning when we start that and when we don't. In terms of funding, that will probably be some sort of bond project or bond issuance again. As you can see, the cost there, $4.4 million. And those have been updated for cost estimates. I have not had an engineer reestablish those costs. I just did a kind of a quick and dirty estimate based on the construction estimates we've seen in terms of year-over-year increases. But that's why that's kind of in a to be determined status, is because of the underpass project.
Okay, I wasn't even considering that, but I'm so used to the bumpy railroad tracks, I just forgot about the underpass.
Well, unfortunately, this plan won't do anything about the bumpy,
Wow.
bumpy tracks, at least on, except for here on 917, we will be able to go under that at some point.
So it will be nice to hear if they do determine later this year that we can hold a town hall with that and try to figure out where we're at on that, because I know a lot of people ask about that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And like I said, just to add to that a little bit, some of this, not particularly the items on this, we're sort of doing as we go. Like one of the projects we just did was down on 10th Street, where they repaved that and they're marking it off as we're adding more restaurants, which unfortunately sort of on hold right now. But I think when we come out of this COVID-19 pandemic, I think we'll have some other restaurants coming into downtown. So we're trying to at least stay even a little bit ahead on parking spaces and things of that nature. And Josh has been able to cover that out of our existing budget. And then once we do come out of it and see that we do have a need, well, hopefully the additional revenue that'll be coming in will help pay for some of the upgrades.
Right.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Now, Josh, I assume what'll happen is these will, a lot of these that were in the bond package, like you said, they won't actually come until next fiscal year, and we'll be budgeting some of those. If for some reason we can't, they just roll into the next year, or?
Right, so just like last year, anything that's in the 2021 column that I can realistically fit into the budget, just like we did last year with some of our equipment. Some of those we fit in, but we finance them. Some of them we use reserves, and that kind of goes back to Scott's question earlier about the use of reserves, and it kind of depends on the way you look at it. But technically speaking, the use of reserves was to pay cash for some of our equipment, specifically two of our patrol units and a piece of equipment for public works. That was technically what the transfers from the general fund over to the capital improvements fund before, and that's the use of reserves was for that specifically. But anything like, just for instance, as a means of example, if you look at, maybe say one of the patrol vehicles or both of the patrol vehicles that are in 2021, and then I'd say maybe the compact loader at 83,000, maybe we're able to fit those in with the current numbers. Those would actually go into the CIP budget. Anything else that's left over in the 2021 column, yes, sir, would be pushed back a year for lack of funding. Right.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
On the audit report, it stated that the unfunded issue was with the CIP program. Are we going to look at this next budget session to start setting some money aside specifically for that program?
Yeah, so if I understand your question, Scott, it was the negative fund balance result, the negative year-end fund balance for the CIP?
Yes.
Yeah, so I actually had us breaking even on that in the amended budget. And there was Reba and I talked about this, there was actually about a $26,000 bank reconciliation that we had to write off. If you remember last year, Reba brought this up last year when we had to bring the trash collection revenues and expenditures. We had basically had to write off about 325,000 just to get off the books, and it hit our general fund
Yeah.
pretty hard. The same thing happened this year. We had to do a $27,000 bank reconciliation that had to be applied to the CIP fund balance that basically makes up the negative fund balance in the CIP. So it looks really bad. It was really an accounting issue, but sure, when we go into the amended budget and the budget preparations for CIP, we will have to account for that, and I'll be working on that this summer.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else?
That's
All right.
And just the last thing, everybody remember that the CIP plan is just that. It's a plan, kind of a guide. It's not technically a budget. So when if you approve this tonight, you're not approving all the spending for the next year. We'll look at what fits into the budget, the actual spending of the actual budget when I propose the budget later this summer.
Okay.
right.
All right, if we don't have any more questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
I'll second.
We got a motion by Jerry Moore, seconded by Mike Kidd to approve the 5-year capital improvement plan. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Staff reports. Does anybody have any questions on the staff reports?
I noticed we did get the fire department report revised and updated. Please pass along my thanks for getting that number straightened out the way it should have been, Josh.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have anything?
Quick question on the fire department. Do we actually have a new fire chief now? Is that correct?
We do, and I believe I sent out an email, I want to say last week, kind of, at least rhetorically, not rhetorically, but introducing you guys to him and letting you guys know a little bit about him. What I had hoped to have for you guys tonight, in any other context, we would have had Chief Griffith here and introduce him, put a face to a name. But obviously, given the circumstances, we decided not to do that. I had hoped to have kind of a short bio, maybe with the picture in the packet. We didn't get that in time. That will be coming to you guys soon, and whenever we can reconvene in normal circumstances, I'll definitely have Chief Griffith in here so you can meet him in person.
And the only other personnel changes we had was Sergeant Wright leaving us, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
He and his family moved down south to the Houston area.
Right. So that puts our police department down two positions, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
Anybody else? All right, next is future agenda items. I discussed with Josh yesterday. I think the big buzzword now is reopening. Sure, we'll take it on a gradual basis. We'll probably be following what the governor and the county do, but I asked Josh to work with Miranda and maybe come up with a plan. I know we were lucky in one way in that we probably didn't have as many businesses affected other than the restaurants that a lot of cities did. Most of ours were considered essential businesses, and so we didn't take quite the hit, but we did have a bunch of restaurants, and I think that have, in some smaller shops that have probably taken a pretty good hit. And I asked Josh to work with Miranda and maybe to come up with a deal where we can, when things do open back up, what we can do to help out these businesses. Come up with something to where we can get our city to back them up, start revisiting those restaurants and do whatever we can to get their business back up where it was. And if any of y'all have any other ideas, what you might do is pass those along to Josh or Miranda, and then maybe we could have this on the work session for May just to see what's come up and discuss it a little bit more at that time. Does anybody else have a future agenda item?
This isn't a future agenda item. I just was wondering if Josh or Mike could tell us about the meeting with the contractor for our drainage projects.
Yeah, Mike, you want to go ahead and unmute your mic and speak to that?
Hello, Mike.
He's muted.
He sent.
He's on, but his mic is muted.
I think he's watching Gunsmoke.
He's back there in his office, so I don't think so.
Oh,
Yeah, we're gonna text him real quick. I know we did talk about this here recently. We intend to have meetings, pre-construction meetings with the contractor and getting that set up before the end of the month. All that will be finalized.
Lost you all together.
Oh,
There you are.
There
Mike?
you are.
Are you here? Can you hear me now?
Yes,
we
sir.
can hear you now.
We got you, Mike.
The meeting with the contractor, we're working on scheduling, but they have not been able to give us the time to do that yet. They're finishing up some jobs. But we are working on doing a similar Zoom meeting with them, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Anybody?
One more thing I'd like to say, Mr. Mayor. Through all this whole nightmare that we're going through with this coronavirus and so on and so forth, we've sat back and watched a lot of mayors and county judges and governors and people kind of jump out and take control of things that really aren't theirs to take control of. One of the things that I want to commend you especially on is seeking counsel from the members of this council before you made decisions on what you were going to do. I also want to commend every member of this council for speaking your mind and telling the truth about how you felt about things need to be handled. I do believe our city has handled it in the proper way. I think our response really wasn't a reaction. It was a response. We thought it through and we handled it the way it should have been handled. And I especially do want to commend Mayor Joe for seeking our counsel before he just jumped out and did something.
Well, I appreciate that. And like I said, we're a team. And like I said, I always want us to act as a team. So I appreciate that. Well, if nothing else, I guess we're adjourned. Terry, have a safe trip home. Watch out for the trains.
It's much quicker now.
You bet. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I think the virtual meeting went fine. If anybody has any comments, though, about pluses or minuses for maybe our next meeting when we do it this way, if y'all would submit those to Alice, and that way we can try and accommodate anything that might make this meeting go a little bit smoother. But I was impressed. I thought it went very well, and I appreciate Alice and Josh and everything they did to make this a successful meeting. Thank y'all.
Very
Josh,
good. Thank you.
Josh, I want to add real quick that you did a really good job with the city employees, keeping everybody safe also.
Yeah, we're a team. Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Man.